Welcome to Chasing Obscene Success with Ash, which was a series I started about 3 months ago, and the whole purpose was especially during these lockdown times, how do we provide some positivity to people, some knowledge to people that can really help them to become a better version of themselves. Um, so for everybody here listening to us, you don a lot of hats, and I thought I'll mention many of those hats. I would like to start with the personal ones, which I always feel that should be the proudest. As a mother, I think it's probably the most important hat that you wear, and a lot of
Yes, I
people,
agree with you.
yeah. And but you're also, from a professional perspective, author of a best-selling book. You've been a coach for people like me, for uh, huge CEOs, and especially on the executive presence part, which is one of my favorite topics. And I almost feel, ma'am, that one of the reasons why I was able to grow is executive presence. Otherwise, I became a general manager at 28, a managing director at 31. And I feel it is that aura when you walk into a room and how you're able to command a presence without having to shout to the top of your voice and, tell people that I am the CEO. But apart from that, you're also a communication expert. So all of these things is a big challenge for today's generation. And I thought no better person than to invite you to this show and
Thank
share
you.
some good nuggets.
It's a pleasure and an honor, and I look forward to interacting with you and, of course, your audience, which is plentiful. You can see all the comments scrolling.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, ma'am, just to get everyone pepped up and into the whole session today, I thought we'll start with a rapid fire. You
Okay,
know, we inspired by current coffee with Karan. Of course, we won't make it controversial. We will keep it very simple and straightforward because these are
sure.
professionals talking. So, if you don't mind, I will just shoot you 5 questions.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. So let's get started, ma'am. There's one thing that we don't know about you.
The fact that I'm an introvert, although I
Okay,
teach communication, but in fact, just today I published an article on introverts and public speaking, and I am an introvert.
very, very interesting. We have to talk about that. I didn't know that. Um, what's your comfort food? You must be traveling before COVID times, and you come back and like this is one comfort food that you want to have. What is that?
My comfort food is dal chawal at home.
Excellent.
That's, and I'm sure
I would
many,
second that. I
I'm
would
sure
second
many
that
in the audience would also relate to that.
totally. And I'm sure you also traveled a lot. So, what is your, if not India, where is your favorite travel destination?
I had done a trip to Cambodia and Vietnam and
Okay,
seen the Angkor Wat temple as well as parts of Vietnam. I think it was magical. So that
excellent.
remains my one of my favorite holiday destinations.
And in India?
In India, of course, Goa, I think for a Mumbaiker is the destination. But having
True.
said that, there are so many beautiful places like in Rajasthan, there's so much in Kerala. So I think India is difficult. It would be top 10 and not top.
Okay, fair enough. A habit during COVID that helped you really manage the situation.
I think COVID has taught everybody to inculcate self-discipline
Yeah.
because the boundaries between personal and professional lives got blurred. So you had
Yes.
to work, exercise, cook, take care of your family members, everything in your own time and had to draw up your own schedule. So I think I also had to polish my self-discipline. Initially, it was tough, but I think it worked out. So yes, that's one big learning.
Excellent. Excellent. That's great. That was very good. So we'll get started now with a little bit more of information for the audience. I'm sure they're all waiting to hear something more useful for them. And the first question I wanted to ask is today, people see you as a successful coach, communication expert, a mother of two. And probably from far away, people may wonder, what a great life you're having. But I'm pretty sure, behind every success, there is struggles, and there is probably, especially when you talk about growing up in India, where there is still a lot of attitude of it's only a female. What can she do? So can you just share a little bit of your journey, ma'am, but more from a struggle perspective? And that is the reason is not to caricature you, but the reason is really to inspire people watching. If they're going through similar struggles, what can they learn?
I have been coaching for the last couple of decades, and actually, I've observed leadership in the last, how it has changed in the last couple of decades. When I started in 99, India was a very different place.
Correct.
Liberalization laws which had started and finally in the early 90s were bearing fruit. Indian companies were looking to grow their global footprint. Multinational companies were setting up shop in India. And of course, on the world stage, globalization was a very big conversation piece. So it was very different times. Now, the biggest challenge for me was convincing corporations that they need to learn executive presence, and it is an investment, it has great return on investment, and it actually impacts the bottom line of the organization. So I remember at one point I met like 200 CEOs and HR heads. It was from 99 to 2002. And I spent all my time convincing them that this is a skill that's needed. The good news is that today I don't need to convince anybody because everybody agrees it's needed. So that was a big struggle. Now,
Okay.
coming to the second part of your question as a woman, I think I was fortunate that maybe in the industry that I'm in, and the fact that I worked with a lot of progressive companies who had a very progressive attitude even at that time. Personally, I did not face any gender bias as a woman. But
Excellent.
having said that, I can tell you one thing, that I have worked with several women leaders, and they definitely have complained, have spoken about it, it's impacted them. So it exists. That's a fact. The good news today is that we are talking a lot of equity, a lot of equality, all the measures that are needed to bring about equality. And I think honestly, there is a lot of work to be done in this space. I
Totally.
support an NGO called Catalyst, where we bridge the gender gap by, upskilling young women engineers and getting them ready for the workplace. And I can tell you there's so much to be done there. So yes, it exists. Yes, we need to support. Enough research has been done to show that mid-career is a breaking point. So you can hire right, and then you can have women at the board level, but the pipeline somehow crashes mid-career because maybe cultural biases, societal prejudices, also the fact that childcare becomes a problem. So multiple reasons why women actually drop out of the workplace. So I think
Very,
we
very
have
interesting.
to plug it there.
Very interesting. Ma'am, would you also, for the sake of audience understanding, explain what is executive presence?
Sure, that's my favorite topic. Yes, so I call it the it factor. And globally, of course, it could be called leadership presence. But having said that, when I started my research, it took me about 3 years to research. And I spoke to a lot of business leaders, I spoke to entrepreneurs, industrialists, even you have given a wonderful comment in the book, and
Thank you.
lots of young achievers. And I started the research, and during the journey, I somehow realized one very critical fact, that all the books that are available on our shelves are written by foreign authors who have possibly never visited the Indian workplace. So I felt as a nation, we needed to have our own study. So it was a first research based model. And I came out with the POISE formula, which is a combination of your physical, online, influencer, stage, and engagement presence. So that's executive presence. Is it needed? Yes. Do leaders know it is important? 100%. How do I define it? It's very difficult to define. Every time I ask people, they would say, yeah, like Barack Obama has it. And they would say, Steve Jobs had it, Sachin has it. And they would give me names, but I would ask them for traits or skills. It would be tough. So I think it's if I had to sum it up, I would say it's a person's ability to display that they can get the job done. So it's about how others perceive you. It is connected to your business results, but it's a lot of perception.
Okay. Then, how can the people, especially these days, I don't know if you're noticing it, these days the age of people starting to work is decreasing. Like I'm seeing 18-year-old kids are hustling now. They are doing part-time jobs. They are actually doing startups. How can they start inculcating, or how can they actually even realize that they need to have executive presence? How to be aware of it? How can they work on it?
I think, in fact, the good news is that they are starting much younger. They are doing a lot of internships, something that I didn't get a chance to do in my younger days. And I think it's great because, it helps them understand their strengths, their gaps, their area of interest. And so many of them are looking at starting a side business or a startup. So I think it's
Correct.
phenomenal. That's superb. But now, having said that, I would say that technical skills and intellectual skills are the must have. They are the hygiene factor, but having to have great attitude, your ability to communicate a thought effectively, of course, your self confidence and self belief. So I think it's a combination of multiple factors which youngsters need to focus on. And the faster you understand that, the better. And finally, relationships matter. Reputation matters. So go and build a strong reputation and make investments in relationships.
Excellent. And do you think there is any difference if I am working in a corporate or if I'm in a startup? Like, could I say that I'm just a startup employee? I don't think executive presence is important for me. What would be your answer to them?
I would say it's even more important because startups are are not structured like a corporation, right? They are flatter. People are wearing multiple hats. They are multitasking all the time. And then, even direction keeps changing. Also, there are many highs and lows in a startup. So suddenly you get a good client, it's time to celebrate. You don't get the next round of funding, you get demotivated. So I think leadership for a startup is actually very tricky. It requires a leader who is positive. It requires a leader who actually instills trust, actually believes in his team, and the team works for him and believes in the purpose of their existence. So I think it's tougher to lead as a startup, and I think executive presence is needed. In fact, a lot of young startups and VCs and youngsters who are looking for investment do come to me for advice. And I always tell them, when you're pitching, that's when your executive presence is on display, because ultimately people only invest in people and not in ideas. So it's
Very
important.
true. And you've seen, I'm sure in your experience, you've seen a lot of leaders. Have you seen very, very talented leaders not able to then rise because of lack of executive presence?
Yes, I think even leadership has gaps. And if I really were to analyze a few of the gaps, the number one would be talking too much. And related to that talking too much is a number two problem, which is the fact that you don't display good listening skills. Thirdly, being too hierarchical. You take decisions on your own, and the best of ideas today, I think our youngsters today are extremely talented, creative, innovative, and the best of ideas can even come from an intern. So if you have the perception that your ideas are the best, it is going to be difficult. And we have seen leadership even change and evolve in COVID times.
Yeah,
Today, we want leaders who show empathy. For the first time, we have seen the person behind the designation. We have seen family members, possibly seen a pet. So we know who the person is. So I think empathy is important. Secondly, I think micromanaging has become passe. Now you
okay.
have to empower your people to do what they have to do, and they have also understood. So the role of a leader has become much more collaborative. So I think it's evolving. It's like working with a moving target.
Interesting. But have you seen, I mean, you have any example for, where you thought this person is really capable to be leader, but sheerly because of lack of executive presence, he or she is not able to make it to the top?
Yes, I have seen many people actually being bypassed at the corporate pyramids are very sharp, especially at the top.
Correct.
So it's almost like a question of not it's almost like a knockout, right? And lack of executive presence. And the
Correct.
reasons that are given are very simple. One, he lacks visibility. Two, he doesn't look like a leader. Three, we can't make investments in him with the board accept him. Now, when it finally comes down, let's agree one thing. There's no shortage of intellectual skills. There's no shortage of hard work, no shortage of technical skills. So what is this? It is just executive presence that gets you knocked up. So I think it's important.
I want to take two of the things you mentioned, visibility and doesn't look like a leader. So, how do you improve visibility? What is your advice?
I think visibility creates opportunities. Enhanced visibility creates enhanced opportunities. So it's I think at every point your executive presence is on display. Whether you are grabbing a coffee, standing at the water cooler and chatting, or networking at an event or industry meet. So take every opportunity that you get to display your executive presence in the best possible way. Having said that, there's no denying the fact, and there's enough research to back it, that at senior levels, it's only visibility that actually holds the maximum points when it comes to the final round. So, how visible are you internally? That's very important. When six people sit down to decide, if four out of six have had wonderful interactions with you, you're in. So, I think it's important. That's why I tell youngsters you must participate internally in team events, in could be volunteer work, CSR initiatives, work across teams, interact and connect with people. Don't hang out with the same four water cooler friends.
Correct.
Externally, of course, you can increase by online presence, participating in things, representing your firm at a level, and there are wonderful opportunities available for everybody who wants to grab them.
Excellent. And many times, ma'am, when I mention about this part of visibility, a lot of people say that, are you asking me to suck up to my boss? I don't think people get it. So, can you
Right.
differentiate what you're trying to say?
Yes, you have to, it's not a question of sucking up to your boss. It is projecting yourself in the right light and doing great work. Let's agree, content is king. That is the
Correct.
foundation of your career, and that is something that you can't compromise. But having said that, how good are you in your peer interactions? How good are you with juniors? How well do you showcase your team's achievements? That's also very important. Are you a team player or do you grab all the credit? Now, when
Yeah.
it comes to decision makers, how do you project your ideas? How do you speak up? How do you connect? How do you get along with people? All these are on display. So, not speaking up is a problem, but saying the wrong things is also a problem.
A problem.
So, it's a fine balance which you have to strike. And I think it's important to understand that every interaction, every email, every phone call, and every WhatsApp message matters.
Very, very interesting. I want to ask you about the student, but I think you kind of answered. Maybe if you can rephrase it again. What are the three things students can do to be successful in future? Especially, I think now in a very, very fast-paced, dynamically changing world.
Yes, I think it is a difficult thing to transition from the classroom to the cubicle. So it's not easy, and 20s are a very tough time in your life because too many changes happen. You finish your education, you move to a corporate career, you have to create impact. Also, your personal life takes over. So managing, balancing your personal life changes at that level. Many times people say that, I lost out because my personal life took over, or I moved a city because I thought I could run away from the problems. That's not where it is at. I would say you should focus on developing a strong personal brand. Get
Okay.
noticed for all the right reasons. Do a great job. Work very hard. Volunteer. Think out of the box. Show your loyalty to your employer. It's not about jumping cities or jobs. It's about actually staying and doing great work. Don't not party, but do create opaque walls between your personal life and professional, online as well as offline. So you can't show up after a night of partying, it is going to reflect on your work. So I think it's important to create walls between your personal and professional presence. Also, don't let your personal life take over your professional, and don't let your professional take over your personal. So I think striking a balance, it's a tough juggling act, but something that if you focus on, it becomes habit and it is not so difficult to do. So spend your 20s and 30s building a strong reputation as an achiever, a performer.
Excellent. I loved what you said. I think people here would really should be taking these points, writing down and trying to follow. I think a couple of very important points you mentioned was creating that wall between personal and professional life. I have even seen, many times youngsters with the, we have a company party, they get a little bit loose and then they do silly things. Sometimes they do it wantedly, sometimes they do it, without knowing, and then your career is gone.
Yes, I always tell people that, don't send an email when you're upset, angry, or drunk.
Correct.
Secondly, when you show up at an office party, the alcohol is free, but senior leadership is watching you. So it's your career at stake. Finally, I would like to give them one more tip, which is that look for good mentors.
Very good.
People who are your well-wishers. They could be in your personal network and they should be from your professional network. But if you display yourself, if you work hard and appear like an achiever, even your bosses and super bosses would love to take you under their umbrella and mentor you. So look for good mentors, and that's the secret of the secret sauce.
Ma'am, I can see a question here. Thank you for highlighting the importance of maintaining a good image. But how do you ensure you don't overthink your action?
If you're authentic, it will not bother you. If you overthink, life is about fine balance. So overdoing anything or underdoing anything is a problem. So I would answer, it's a great question, but I would just say daily, just maintain the balance. Don't overthink, don't overdo anything, don't stress yourself out. It will come to you automatically.
Very good. I think I would probably say that quite true with what I have also experienced. Um, I always feel that when you're in doubt about whether you're overdoing it, there's nothing wrong in just coming back to zero and just seeing the reaction from people and then maybe just correct it as you go. You really can't, say exactly it is 10 centimeters or, 100 mil. It's not something that you can measure.
No. And I always feel the balance is inside you. In fact, the human biochemistry is so phenomenal that if you get even little upset or you are little stressed, your breathing pattern changes, your thoughts change. And I think that is a signal that everybody should be very tuned to. Because if you ignore that, then the balance is going to get skewed.
Another question we see here from Palak is, should you change jobs in your 20s or stay at a place for years to build your CV strong?
I think it is important not to jump jobs. As long as you're learning, first of all, don't take the first job that you get. It's important for you to take a job which is not based purely on the pay packet, but a job where you will learn and in an industry that you enjoy. Otherwise, if you're just going to join because it's a phenomenal industry and your peer group thinks so, or it's a great package and you couldn't get better, I think you are going to be regretting it. Having said that, you must stick around for a few years in a job. Jumping too many jobs is not only going to not show well, but companies will not make investment in you because
Yeah.
if you don't stay, they don't invest in you. So your learning curve is going to be shorter.
In fact, Sheetal ma'am, I can tell you that whenever I get a CV, the first thing I check is tenure. If
Yeah.
they have not stayed more than 2.5 to 3 years in a company, I just not even look at the resume. I just trash the resume.
Yeah.
And you see in India, especially people, every year they change jobs,
Yeah.
and this is really frustrating. And you
And
know
they're
that they
being
will not stay with.
short-sighted. Yeah, they're being
Exactly.
short-sighted about their career.
Absolutely. Very interesting. Ma'am, I also want to ask you, I just feel somewhere the world has changed with education. Formal education seems to be not like a big thing, is what I'm hearing. Like even my own social media team, one of the guys, it told me that he wants to just learn from me. He doesn't want to go to college. Do you think that there is an era coming where formal education is overrated?
I think first of all, in certain specialized fields like a science or a technology or medicine, you definitely need formal education. Now, secondly, of course, if you're a genius, then you don't need formal education. If you look at some of the Silicon Valley
Correct.
billionaires who are dropouts, now if you can come up with a phenomenal idea, possibly you don't need formal education. But what you really don't need is masses of people who have just done a master's program in a general management and are and it's become a must have. So I think that's not needed. Secondly, I do believe that education is a card. Branded education helps because it gets you an entry level, which is much better. But having said that, it's a card that you can play only once. Because after everybody joins, it becomes a level playing field. And if you see the CEOs of the Fortune 500, a large chunk of them are not from the best of institutes. So clearly, there's much more to climbing the corporate ladder than just a great education. So it can take you only that far and no further.
Very
So
true.
many things matter.
Very true. Very true. I think I often feel that only formal education won't suffice. I think you also mentioned, right, like before as well, doing other things apart from formal education will also help. When you're studying, do other stuff, do internships, do part-time work, hustle, you learn practicalities of life.
Yes, and you learn to sell. I always tell everybody that, there are few jobs that every youngster should do. One is they should definitely work in a restaurant as serving tables. It teaches you a very quick lesson in humility because it
Correct.
completely crushes your ego. And the
Correct.
second is that everybody should learn how to sell. So do a salesperson job. Again, that kills your ego because most people, whatever you're selling, they don't want to buy. Secondly, it teaches you how to sell your ideas, even internally, because all the time we are selling. So I think being
I
a server is and a salesperson
Super.
is critical.
So all the students watching here start a waitering job and a sales job. I completely concur. I have done both these jobs. It is so funny you say this. When I graduated in 2002, those times, it is not as like now where
Yeah.
people are hustling. But I had no choice. I couldn't find a job after engineering. I was forced to do door-to-door sales. I was selling SIM cards, Nokia SIM cards. And you're right, your ego is crushed like anything, like 10 doors you knock, 9 doors are going to shut it on your face.
Yeah,
And
and they're
that's
not
the beauty.
interested and they treat you badly. And the biggest learning is that never will you treat a server badly in your life once you have
Correct.
served yourself. So
Correct. Ma'am, we'll just take one last question here. I can see it's about the politics. How to
yes.
handle college or team politics, being a part of two committees in university. I'm facing this problem very much. This is from Shivi Shere.
When you get even three people together. So even corporate politics is a separate chapter by itself, but handling people is not easy. And it's a skill that the faster you learn it in the college committee, trust me, it's going to come very handy later on in life because
Correct.
managing people is actually the toughest part. It's no longer your work, your skill, your intellect, but how you connect with people, how you collaborate. And I'm sure you would agree, Ashok, that as a CEO, your job just requires communicating, collaborating, and managing people.
All
So
the time.
after a point, so I think my friend who has asked this question, learn it, observe others. But one tip I can give you is that don't be reactive or impulsive. I think learning executive maturity at an early age, offering a calibrated response is a huge skill. And the faster you learn it, the better you're going to be off.
Very true. I also think the best way to avoid office politics is not to be part of any groups. And, I'm sure you have seen this, right? In organizations, there are certain people who will actually, they won't initiate the politics, but they will not stop it as well. Somebody comes and says, Arey, dekha uske bare mein, kya ho raha hai? And this person will contribute. हाँ 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 आप जो बोल रहे हो वो सही है
Yeah.
and this is how so you suddenly become part of this clan this group and that is the biggest problem so I think beautifully said don't react at the same time don't take sides just listen to the information and make an informed decision and being open and transparent.
Yeah. And every organization has a grapevine. Sometimes it works faster than the internet. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah.
Great, ma'am. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Thank
I can't
you. My
believe it is 30
pleasure.
minutes. It feels like 5 minutes.
Thank you, my pleasure. And your audience is, asking a lot of wonderful questions. If there were some questions that were left unanswered and you felt that I should, you can mail them to me. I can send them back to you.
I will. And I also
Great.
recommend everyone, please follow her on Instagram and Twitter. She regularly is actually putting out content for people as well. And I'm sure we can also direct message her some questions. And ma'am, thank you so much again for joining us. I look
Thank you.
forward to having more collaborations with you in the future. And I
Thank
think
you.
you touched upon a very, very important, but I also feel a much neglected point is executive presence. A lot of people I'm seeing, even in Schindler, very, very smart, intelligent, just can't make it to the top because of lack of executive presence. And I hope today we have at least sown the seeds to the young generation watching us today. Please work on your executive presence. And if you need to know more, Sheetal ma'am has released a wonderful book. It's available from Amazon, I guess, ma'am.
Yes, it's on Amazon. It's a
It's on
bestseller.
Amazon.
I can share the details if they send me a link, or they can go to Amazon directly.
Please. Okay. I will,
Thank you.
let's put it on your social media handles as well. I'm sure the information
Thank-
is there.
Yes,
So
yes.
please do check it out. Read it. It's worth your time. And a lot of CEOs, including myself, we have quoted, some of our thoughts there. I'm sure it will be very, very helpful. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you. Stay safe, get
Thank
vaccinated, and thank you. Thank you so much.